The man watching from the woods. It started with a camera. Not mine. I found it hanging from a tree behind my house, pointed directly at my bedroom window. At first, I thought it belonged to a hunter or maybe someone studying wildlife. But when I checked the memory card, I realized something strange. The camera wasn't watching animals. It was watching me. And the worst part, whoever placed it there had been doing it for weeks. Moving to the woods. 2 months ago, I moved into a small rental house in northern Oregon. It was peaceful. The house sat near a thick forest, far away from the busy city. I work online, so the quiet environment actually felt perfect. No traffic. No loud neighbors. Just trees, wind, and silence. But about a week after moving in, something started happening every night. Around 2 a.m., I would hear footsteps outside. Leaves crunching. Branches moving. At first, I assumed it was wildlife. Maybe deer or raccoons. But the strange thing was, the sounds always stopped right beneath my bedroom window. Almost like someone was standing there. The discovery. One afternoon, I decided to walk into the woods behind the house. About 30 yards from my backyard, I noticed something attached to a tree. It was a trail camera. The type people use to record animals. But this one wasn't facing the forest. It was pointed directly at my house. More specifically, at my bedroom window. My stomach dropped. I carefully removed the camera and checked the memory card. There were hundreds of photos. Most of them were taken late at night. Pictures of my house. Pictures of the porch. Pictures of me walking to my car. Pictures of me bringing groceries inside. And then I noticed the last photo. It was taken that same morning. And in the photo, I was standing outside, holding the camera. Which meant something unsettling. Someone had been near the camera very recently. Calling the police. I called the police right away. 2 officers arrived about 40 minutes later. They checked the camera and searched the surrounding woods. At first, they didn't find anything unusual. But then one of them pointed toward the ground. In the mud behind the trees, there were footprints. Not just a few. Dozens of them. They moved back and forth across the same spot. Like someone had been standing there for long periods of time. Watching the house, the officer asked if I knew anyone who might be trying to scare me. But I honestly couldn't think of anyone. The video file. Later that night, I checked the memory card again. That's when I noticed something I had missed earlier. A video file. It had been recorded a few nights before. The video showed my house in the dark. For the first minute, nothing happened. Just wind moving the trees. Then a figure slowly stepped into view. The person was wearing a hoodie and standing near the trees. They didn't move much. They simply stood there, facing the house. Then something strange happened. The person slowly turned their head and looked directly toward the camera. And then the video ended. The night visitor. That same night around 2 a.m., I heard something again. 3 slow knocks on my front door. Knock. 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 My heart started racing. I stayed completely quiet and didn't move. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps on the porch. Then a quiet voice outside. Hello. I didn't respond. After about a minute, the footsteps walked away toward the woods. The final detail. The police searched the area again the next day. But they never found anyone. No clear evidence. No suspects. Before leaving, one of the officers mentioned something interesting. Trail cameras only take photos when they detect movement. Which means the final photo, the one where I was holding the camera, was likely triggered by something moving nearby. Maybe another person. Maybe something else. Either way, I decided to move out of that house the following week. Call to action, CTA. If you enjoy listening to real creepy stories like this one, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more true horror stories every week. And before you go to sleep tonight, take a quick look outside your window, just in case, because sometimes someone might already be watching. Second story, the voice in the baby monitor. The first time I heard the voice, I thought it was a glitch. It came through my baby monitor at exactly 3:04 a.m. A quiet whisper, soft, calm, and it said something that made my heart stop. Don't worry, I'm watching him. The strange thing was, my wife and I were the only adults in the house. Moving into the new house. Last year, my wife Emily and I moved into a small house in Pennsylvania. It was the perfect place for starting a family. Quiet neighborhood, friendly neighbors, and plenty of space for our newborn son, Liam. Like most new parents, we bought a baby monitor so we could hear Liam if he woke up during the night. The monitor sat on my bedside table every night. Usually it only picked up small sounds, Liam breathing, or the occasional cry. But one night, something unusual happened. The first voice. Around 3 a.m., the monitor suddenly turned on. At first, I thought Liam had woken up. But instead of crying, I heard a voice. Very faint, almost like someone whispering near the microphone. SHHH, go back to sleep. I sat up immediately. Emily woke up too and asked what was wrong. I told her what I heard, but she thought it was probably interference. Sometimes other monitors in the neighborhood can accidentally connect. So I walked to Liam's room just to be sure. He was asleep. Everything looked completely normal. Strange sounds. Over the next few nights, the monitor kept turning on by itself. Sometimes it picked up small noises. A creaking sound. A faint movement. But Liam was always asleep when we checked. Then one night the voice came back. Clearer this time. I'm right here. I felt a chill run down my spine. Emily heard it too. Now we both knew it wasn't just interference. Someone or something was speaking through the monitor. Checking the monitor. The next day, I checked the monitor system. It was connected to our home Wi-Fi. That meant technically someone could access it if the connection wasn't secure. I changed the password immediately and updated all the settings. For the next 2 nights, everything was quiet. No strange voices. No unusual sounds. We thought the problem was solved. But on the 3rd night, it happened again. The message. At exactly 3:04 a.m., the monitor clicked on. Emily and I both woke up instantly. Then we heard the same whisper. Calm. Slow. Almost friendly. Don't worry, he's safe. Emily grabbed my arm. Neither of us spoke. A few seconds later, the monitor went silent again. That was enough for us. We went straight to Liam's room. He was still asleep in his crib. Nothing looked out of place. But when I checked the monitor camera the next morning, I noticed something strange. The camera angle had slightly changed. Just a few inches. Like someone had adjusted it. What we found, I decided to check the monitor logs through the app. And that's when I saw something unsettling. The camera had been accessed from another device. Not mine. Not my wife. An unknown device had connected several times during the night. Someone had been watching the camera and apparently talking through it. The final surprise. I immediately unplugged the monitor and replaced it with a new system that didn't connect to the internet. Everything has been quiet ever since. But there's one detail I still can't explain. The login records showed the unknown device connecting several times. But the location of the connection was listed as inside our own house. Call to action, CTA. If you enjoy listening to creepy real stories like this, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more true horror stories every week. And if you have a baby monitor or security camera at home, you might want to check who else can access it. Because sometimes, you're not the only one watching. The last train home. I thought I was the only person on the train. It was the last train of the night. Empty. Silent. Just me sitting near the middle of the car. But halfway through the ride, I noticed something strange. Someone else was there. And the weird part, I never saw them get on. Late night commute. A few years ago, I worked late shifts in Chicago. Most nights I finished work around midnight. The easiest way to get home was the train. Usually, there were a few people riding that late. But one night, the station was completely empty. No commuters. No security guards. Just the quiet sound of the train pulling into the station. I stepped inside and sat near the window. The doors closed, and the train slowly started moving. At first, everything felt normal. Something feels off. About 10 minutes into the ride, I started feeling uneasy. The train car was silent. Too silent. No phones. No conversations. Just the sound of the tracks. That's when I looked toward the far end of the train car. And I saw someone sitting there. A man wearing a dark coat. He was sitting perfectly still, facing forward. I was confused because I never saw him enter the train. But I assumed maybe he had been sitting in another car earlier. So I ignored it. The reflection. A few minutes later, I looked at the window beside me. The glass reflected the inside of the train. And that's when I noticed something strange. In the reflection, the man wasn't moving at all. Not even slightly. His head stayed in the exact same position. His posture never changed. It was almost like he was frozen. I glanced back toward him directly. He was still sitting there. Still completely motionless. The announcement. The train stopped at the next station. The doors opened. No one got on. No one got off. But when the train started moving again, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The man had moved. He was now sitting 2 rows closer. And I never heard footsteps. Getting nervous. At this point, I was starting to feel nervous. The train car was still empty except for us. I tried to act normal and looked at my phone. A few minutes later, I checked the reflection in the window again. He had moved again. Now he was only a few seats behind me. Still sitting perfectly still. Still silent. That's when I decided I would leave at the next station. The next stop. The train slowed down and stopped. The doors opened. I stood up quickly and walked out. But before the doors closed, I turned back to look inside the train car. And the seat where the man had been sitting was empty. Completely empty. What I learned later. The next day at work, I told a coworker about the strange experience. He listened quietly. Then he said something that made me uncomfortable. He asked me what train line I took. When I told him, his face changed. Apparently years earlier, there had been an accident on that exact line late at night. And ever since then, some late-night passengers claimed they sometimes saw someone sitting quietly on the last train. A man wearing a dark coat. Sitting alone. Call to action CTA. If you enjoy listening to creepy stories like this one, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more true horror stories every week. And if you ever take the last train home late at night, take a look around the train car, just to make sure you're really alone. The security camera alert. True scary story narration. Hook first 10-15 seconds. At 2:13 a.m., my phone sent a notification. Motion detected at your front door. That wasn't unusual. My security camera alerts me whenever something moves. But when I opened the camera app, I felt a chill. Someone was standing on my porch, completely still, just staring at the door. And the strangest part, they had been standing there for almost 20 minutes. A quiet neighborhood. I live in a quiet suburb outside Seattle. It's the kind of neighborhood where nothing unusual really happens. Most nights are calm. Street lights, empty sidewalks, and the occasional car passing by. About a year ago, I installed a security camera by my front door, mostly just for peace of mind. It sends notifications whenever it detects motion. Usually it's just delivery drivers, or sometimes a neighbor walking their dog. But one night the alert was different. The late night alert. It was a little after 2 a.m. when my phone vibrated. Half asleep, I opened the notification. Motion detected. I tapped the camera feed and immediately saw someone standing on my porch. A tall figure wearing a dark hoodie. They weren't knocking. They weren't ringing the doorbell. They were just standing there, looking straight at the door, waiting. At first, I assumed they would leave. Maybe they were at the wrong house. But minutes kept passing. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. They never moved. Not even once. They just stood there, perfectly still, watching the door. That's when I started feeling uncomfortable. Checking outside, I quietly walked toward the living room window and peeked through the curtain. The porch light was on, and the person was still there, standing exactly the same way, looking directly at the door. I couldn't see their face clearly because of the hood, but something about the way they stood felt strange, almost unnatural. The camera recording. I went back to my phone and watched the camera recording. The footage showed the person walking onto the porch. Then they stopped and stayed there, without moving, without knocking, without doing anything, just standing. After about 20 minutes, they slowly stepped back, then walked down the driveway and disappeared into the dark street. The strange detail. The next morning, I reviewed the footage again. That's when I noticed something strange. Right before the person left, they looked directly into the camera, almost like they knew exactly where it was. Then they pointed at the lens and slowly shook their head. What happened after? I reported the footage to the police. They checked the area, but no one matching the description was found. Nothing like that ever happened again. But sometimes, when I get security alerts late at night, I still hesitate before opening the app, because part of me worries that one day I might see that same person standing there again, waiting. Call to action CTA. If you enjoy creepy real stories like this, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more true horror stories every week. And if you have security cameras at home, you might want to check your notifications carefully, because sometimes someone might be watching you back. The locked door upstairs. True scary story narration. Hook first 10-15 seconds. When I moved into my new apartment, the landlord told me something strange. "There's a storage room upstairs," he said. "But it stays locked. No one uses it." At the time, I didn't think much about it. But about 2 weeks after moving in, I started hearing footsteps coming from that locked room. Every night. Around the same time. Moving into the apartment. A few years ago, I moved to a small town in Colorado for a new job. The apartment I rented was part of an older house that had been divided into 2 units. My place was on the first floor. Above me was a small attic storage area that the landlord said nobody used. He even showed me the locked door at the top of the stairs. A heavy wooden door with an old metal lock. "No one goes up there," he told me. And honestly, I believed him. The first night. For the first week, everything felt normal. The neighborhood was quiet. The apartment was peaceful. But one night, while watching TV around midnight, I heard something above me. A slow creaking sound. Like someone walking carefully across the floor. At first I assumed it was the house settling. Old houses make noises sometimes. But then the footsteps continued. Slow. Steady. Back and forth. Checking the door. The next day I asked my landlord if anyone had gone into the storage room. He looked confused. "No," he said. "The door stays locked." To prove it, he walked upstairs with me. The door was still closed. The lock was still in place. Nothing looked unusual. So I tried to forget about it. The sounds continue. But the sounds didn't stop. Every night around midnight, the same footsteps started again. Walking across the floor above me. Sometimes slow. Sometimes quicker. Almost like someone packing. One night I even heard something else. A soft knocking sound. 3 quiet taps on the floor above my bedroom. Recording the sound. Eventually, I decided to record the noise on my phone. Right around midnight, the footsteps started again. So I held my phone up toward the ceiling and recorded. The next morning, I played the recording. The footsteps were clearly there. But there was another sound too. A faint voice. So quiet I almost missed it. It sounded like someone whispering. The door opens. That same evening, I went upstairs again. The hallway was empty. But something was different. The storage room door was slightly open. Just a few inches. The lock was still hanging on the door. But it wasn't closed anymore. Slowly, I pushed the door open. Inside was a small, empty room. Dusty floor. Old wooden beams. And nothing else. Completely empty. The final discovery. Before leaving the room, I looked down at the floor. There were marks in the dust. Footprints. Walking back and forth across the room. Like someone had been packing there for a long time. But the strange thing was, the footprints didn't lead to the door. They simply stopped in the middle of the room. Call to action, CTA. If you enjoy listening to creepy true stories like this one, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more horror stories every week. And if you ever move into an old house, pay attention to the sounds above you at night. Because sometimes, you might not be the only one living there. The phone call from my own number. True scary story narration. Hook first 10-15 seconds. One night at exactly 1:47 a.m. my phone rang. Half asleep, I looked at the screen and immediately felt confused because the caller ID showed my own phone number. I thought it had to be some kind of glitch. But when I answered the call, I heard someone breathing on the other end. A normal evening. A few years ago, I was living alone in a small apartment in Texas. Nothing unusual ever really happened there. Most nights were quiet. I would watch TV, scroll through my phone for a while, and eventually go to sleep. That night felt completely normal too. I turned off the lights around midnight and went to bed. Everything was silent until my phone suddenly started ringing. The strange call. When I looked at the screen, I froze. The caller ID showed my exact phone number. At first, I assumed it was some kind of phone error. Maybe a glitch with the network. Still half asleep, I answered the call. Hello. For a moment, there was no response. Just silence. Then I heard something. Breathing. Slow and steady. Like someone standing very close to the phone. Trying to speak. Hello, who is this? I asked again. The breathing continued. Then the line suddenly went quiet. And the call ended. I checked the call history on my phone. The call was still there. Incoming call from my own number. That made absolutely no sense. The second call. About 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. Same number. My number. This time I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the screen as it rang. Finally, curiosity got the better of me. I answered. Hello. For a moment, nothing. Then I heard a voice. But it sounded distant. Almost like it was echoing through another room. And the voice said something that made my heart race. Don't answer the next call. Then the line went dead again. Confusion. I sat there for a few minutes, trying to understand what had just happened. None of it made sense. Maybe someone was spoofing my number. Maybe it was a prank. Eventually, I decided to ignore it and go back to sleep. But about 5 minutes later, my phone rang again. Same number. The last call. This time I didn't answer. I just watched the phone ring on the table. The call continued for almost 30 seconds. Then it stopped. After that, my phone stayed completely silent for the rest of the night. Something I noticed later. The next morning, I checked my call history again. The strange thing was, only one call was listed. The first one. The other two calls had completely disappeared from the log. Like they never happened. Even now, I still don't know how someone could call me from my own number. Or how those calls vanished from the phone records. But ever since that night, whenever my phone rings late at night, I always check the number twice before answering. Call to action, CTA. If you enjoy creepy real stories like this one, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more true horror stories every week. And if your phone ever rings late at night from an unknown number, you might want to think carefully before answering. Because sometimes, the call might not be coming from where you expect. The empty hotel room. True scary story narration. Hook first 10-15 seconds. Last year, I stayed in a hotel room that was supposed to be empty. At least, that's what the front desk told me. But around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of someone walking across the room. Slow footsteps. From the door toward the bed. The strange part. When I turned on the light, there was no one there. A business trip. A few years ago, I traveled to Arizona for a short business trip. It was just for 2 nights. The company booked a small hotel near the airport. Nothing fancy. Just a quiet place to sleep before meetings. When I arrived late that evening, the lobby was almost empty. The receptionist handed me my room key and told me I was on the 3rd floor. Room 314. The first night. The room looked normal. A bed. A desk. A small bathroom. Nothing unusual. I unpacked a few things, watched TV for about an hour, and eventually went to sleep. The first part of the night was completely quiet. But sometime around 3 a.m., I suddenly woke up. At first, I didn't know why. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow and soft, moving across the carpet. Looking around, I opened my eyes and looked toward the door. The room was dark, except for a little light coming through the window. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, everything was silent again. I assumed maybe someone was walking in the hallway outside. So I turned on the bedside lamp. The room was empty. Nothing out of place. No one there. The second night. The next day was busy with meetings. By the time I returned to the hotel, I was too tired to think about the strange noise from the night before. I went to sleep earlier that night. But once again, around the same time, I woke up and heard the same sound. Footsteps, moving slowly across the room. This time, I sat up immediately and turned on the light. Again, nothing. Asking the front desk. The next morning before checking out, I mentioned the noise to the receptionist. I asked if anyone had been walking in the room next to mine during the night. She looked confused. Then she checked something on the computer and said something that made me uncomfortable. Apparently, the rooms on both sides of mine had been empty that night. No guests, no cleaning staff, no one scheduled to enter the rooms. The strange detail. Before leaving the hotel, I remembered something else. The night I checked in, I briefly saw a small plaque near the elevator. It listed a few dates when the hotel had been renovated over the years. One of the dates caught my attention. It mentioned a renovation on the third floor many years ago, after an incident that had happened in one of the rooms. The room number listed on that plaque. Room 314. Call to action CTA. If you enjoy listening to creepy stories like this one, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more true horror stories every week. And if you ever stay alone in a hotel room late at night, pay attention to the sounds around you. Because sometimes, you might not be the only one there. The door that opened at 3:00 a.m. True scary story narration. Hook first 10-15 seconds. Every night at exactly 3:00 a.m. My bedroom door would slowly open. At first, I thought it was just the air. Maybe a draft from the hallway. But one night, I decided to test something. Before going to sleep, I locked the door. And at 3:00 a.m., I woke up to the sound of the lock turning. Moving into the house. A few years ago, I moved into a small house in Ohio. It wasn't new, but it was comfortable and affordable. The previous owner had lived there for decades. The neighborhood was quiet and peaceful. For the first few weeks, everything felt normal, until I started noticing something strange at night. The first time. One night around 3 a.m., I suddenly woke up. I wasn't sure why. Then I noticed my bedroom door slowly moving. It creaked open just a few inches. At first I assumed it was just air pressure in the house. Older homes sometimes have that problem. So I got up, closed the door, and went back to sleep. It keeps happening. But the next night, the same thing happened. At almost the exact same time. 3:00 a.m. The door slowly opened again. This continued for several nights. Every single time, the door would open slightly. Never all the way. Just enough to reveal the dark hallway outside. Testing the door. Eventually, I decided to test something. Before going to bed, I closed the door tightly. Then I locked it. Now there was no way the door could open unless someone turned the lock. That night, I fell asleep expecting nothing to happen. But around 3 a.m., I woke up again and heard a sound. A small metal click, like a lock turning. Looking at the door, I slowly looked toward the door. It was still closed, but the handle was slowly moving, turning slightly, then stopping, then turning again. My heart was racing at this point. I stayed completely still, watching the door. After a few seconds, the handle stopped moving, and everything went silent again. The morning discovery. The next morning, I checked the door carefully. The lock was still in place. Nothing looked broken. Nothing seemed unusual. But when I checked the hallway, I noticed something strange on the floor. Light marks in the dust, right outside my bedroom door, as if someone had been standing there during the night. What happened next? After that night, I started sleeping with a small light on in the hallway. And strangely enough, the door never opened again. Not once, but sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, I still look toward the door, just to make sure the handle isn't moving again. Call to action, CTA. If you enjoy creepy true stories like this one, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more horror stories every week. And tonight, before you go to sleep, take a quick look at your bedroom door, just in case. Because sometimes, things move when no one is there. The face in the window. True scary story narration. Hook first 10-15 seconds. One night while watching TV, I noticed something in the reflection of my window. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. But when I looked closer, I realized there was a face outside, looking in. The strange thing was, I lived on the second floor. A quiet evening. A few years ago, I lived in a small apartment building in California. It wasn't a big complex, just a few units and a small parking lot outside. My apartment was on the second floor. From my living room window, I could see the street and the lights from nearby houses. Most evenings were quiet. I'd get home from work, eat dinner, and watch TV before going to sleep. That night started exactly the same way. Something in the window. Around 11 p.m., I was sitting on the couch watching a movie. The lights in my apartment were dim, and the TV screen reflected faintly on the window. That's when I noticed something strange in the reflection. A shape behind me. At first, I assumed it was just something inside the room. But when I turned around, nothing was there. Confused, I looked back at the window again. And that's when I saw it clearly. A face, right outside the glass. The shock. I froze. Because my apartment was on the second floor. There was no balcony, no ladder, nothing anyone could stand on. But the face was clearly there, looking directly inside. The moment I stood up from the couch, the face disappeared. Checking outside, my heart was racing as I walked slowly toward the window. I pulled the curtain aside and looked down. The parking lot below was empty. No one walking. No cars moving. Nothing unusual. I even looked up and down the street. But there was no sign of anyone. The next night, the next evening, I tried to convince myself that maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was just the reflection of something inside the room. But around the same time that night, I noticed something again. A reflection in the window. I slowly turned my head. And there it was. The same face. Outside the glass. Watching. The strange detail. This time I forced myself to stay calm. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. Then I quickly pointed it toward the window. The light hit the glass. But outside, there was nothing there. Just darkness. No person. No ladder. Nothing that could explain how someone could be standing there. What I did after. The next day, I moved my couch away from the window. I also started closing the curtains every night. Nothing like that has happened again since. But sometimes when I walk past that window late at night, I still avoid looking at the reflection. Because part of me is afraid I might see that face again. Call to action, CTA. If you enjoy creepy real stories like this one, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more horror stories every week. And tonight, if you see your reflection in a window, take a closer look, just to make sure you're the only face there. The car that followed me home. True scary story narration. Hook first 10-15 seconds. One night while driving home, I noticed the same car behind me. At first, I didn't think much about it. Cars follow each other all the time on the road. But after 15 minutes, after 5 turns, and after I even changed my route completely, that same car was still behind me. And that's when I realized something. It wasn't a coincidence. The late drive. A few years ago, I worked late shifts in a small town in Florida. Most nights I left work around midnight. The roads were usually quiet at that hour. Just a few streetlights and the occasional car passing by. One night as I pulled onto the main road, I noticed headlights behind me. A dark sedan. Nothing unusual. At least not at first. The same car. About 10 minutes into the drive, I turned onto another street. The sedan turned too. Again, I didn't think much about it. But then I made another turn. And another. Each time the same car followed. Now I was starting to feel uneasy. Maybe they just happened to live in the same area. That's what I told myself. But something still felt off. Changing the route. Instead of going straight home, I decided to test something. I took a different route through a neighborhood I normally never used. 2 turns later, the sedan was still there. Right behind me. Keeping the same distance. That's when I knew something wasn't right. The gas station. I decided not to go home. Instead, I pulled into a gas station that was still open. Bright lights. Security cameras. A few people inside the store. As soon as I pulled in, the sedan slowly drove past the gas station. It didn't stop. It didn't turn. It just continued down the road. I waited a few minutes, then drove home. The next night, the next evening, I left work around the same time. Everything seemed normal. Until I pulled onto the main road and saw headlights behind me again. A dark sedan. The exact same car. The strange ending. This time, I drove straight to the nearest police station. The moment I turned into the parking lot, the sedan immediately turned around and drove away. I never saw the car again after that night. But even now, when I drive home late at night, I sometimes check my mirrors a little more carefully, just to make sure the same headlights aren't following me again. Call to action, CTA. If you enjoy listening to creepy real stories like this one, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more true horror stories every week. And if you're ever driving alone late at night, always check your mirrors. Because sometimes, you might not be the only one heading home. The man in the parking lot. True scary story narration. Hook first 10-15 seconds. One night after work, I walked into an empty parking lot. My car was the only one there. At least that's what I thought. Because as I got closer to my car, I noticed someone sitting inside it. The strange part. My car doors were locked. Leaving work late. A few years ago, I worked the closing shift at a small retail store in Nevada. Most nights I finished work around midnight. By the time I left, the shopping center parking lot was usually empty. That night was no different. The streetlights were on, the stores were closed, and the entire parking lot looked completely quiet. I walked toward my car while checking my phone. Everything seemed normal. Something inside the car. As I got closer to my car, something caught my attention. The interior light inside the car flickered for a moment. That was strange because the car was locked. I slowed down and looked more carefully through the windshield. And that's when I saw it. A silhouette. Someone sitting in the passenger seat. Freezing in place. I immediately stopped walking. My heart started racing. I knew I had locked the car earlier that evening. There was no reason for anyone to be inside. The person inside the car wasn't moving. They were just sitting there, completely still, watching from a distance. Instead of getting closer, I slowly stepped back. I didn't want whoever was inside the car to notice me. From where I stood, I could still see the shape sitting in the passenger seat. The streetlight above the car made the shadow very clear. But I couldn't see the person's face. Calling for help. I quietly walked back toward the store and asked one of my coworkers to come outside with me. When we returned to the parking lot, something was different. The interior light in the car was off, and the passenger seat looked empty. Checking the car, we walked slowly toward the car together. I unlocked the doors using the key fob. The lights flashed. The doors unlocked. But when we looked inside, the car was completely empty. No one inside. Nothing out of place. The strange detail. At first I thought maybe I had imagined it. But then my coworker pointed at the passenger seat. There were clear marks on the fabric, like someone had been sitting there for a while. The seat cushion was slightly pressed down. After that night, nothing like that ever happened again. But ever since that night, whenever I walk toward my car late at night, I always check the windows carefully first, just to make sure no one is already inside. Call to action, CTA. If you enjoy creepy real stories like this one, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more true horror stories every week. And if you ever walk to your car alone at night, take a quick look inside before unlocking the door. Because sometimes, you might not be the only one there. The elevator that stopped on the wrong floor. True scary story narration. Hook first 10-15 seconds. One night I stepped into an elevator completely alone. I pressed the button for the 5th floor. The doors closed and the elevator started moving. But instead of stopping on my floor, it stopped on the 7th floor. The strange part, there was no 7th floor in that building. Moving into the building. A few years ago, I moved into a small apartment building in New York. It wasn't very tall, just 5 floors. My apartment was on the 5th. The building was older, but everything worked fine. There was a small elevator near the lobby that most residents used. Normally it was quiet and uneventful. But one night something strange happened. Coming home late. I came home late from work around midnight. The lobby was empty. No neighbors. No security guard. Just the soft buzzing sound of the lights. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the 5th floor. The doors closed slowly. The elevator began moving upward. Everything felt normal at first. The unexpected stop. A few seconds later, the elevator stopped. The display above the door showed the number 7. That confused me immediately, because the building only had 5 floors. Then the elevator doors slowly opened. Outside was a dark hallway, completely silent, and I had never seen that hallway before. Something felt wrong. For a moment, I just stood there inside the elevator, looking out at the hallway. The lights were dim. The corridor looked old and dusty, almost like it hadn't been used in years. But something about the place felt strange. The air felt heavy, and the silence felt uncomfortable. So I decided not to step out. The door closes. After a few seconds, the elevator doors closed again. Without me pressing anything, the elevator started moving once more. This time it stopped on the 5th floor, just like it was supposed to. When the doors opened, everything looked normal. The familiar hallway, the same carpet, the same lighting. Nothing unusual. Asking the manager. The next morning, I mentioned the strange elevator stop to the building manager. He looked confused. Then he told me something interesting. The building originally had 7 floors decades ago, but the top 2 floors were removed during a major renovation many years earlier. Now the building only had 5 floors. And according to him, the elevator system had also been updated to remove those floors. The strange detail. Before leaving the office, I asked one more question. I asked if the elevator could somehow still stop on those old floors. He shook his head. No, he said. That's impossible. Call to action, CTA. If you enjoy creepy stories like this one, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more true horror stories every week. And if you ever step into an elevator late at night, pay attention to the floor numbers. Because sometimes, you might stop somewhere you didn't expect. The shadow in my backyard. True scary story narration. Hook first 10-15 seconds. Every night around 2 a.m., my backyard motion light would turn on. At first, I assumed it was an animal. Maybe a raccoon. Maybe a stray cat. But one night, I decided to check the security camera. And what I saw on the footage didn't look like any animal I had ever seen. A quiet neighborhood. A few years ago, I lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood in North Carolina. My house had a small backyard surrounded by a wooden fence. Nothing fancy. Just a little space with some trees and a small shed. I installed a motion light and a security camera back there mainly for safety. Most nights, nothing ever triggered it. Until one week, when the light started turning on at the same time every night. The motion light. The first few nights, I didn't think much about it. Motion lights are sensitive. Wind can move branches. Animals can trigger them. But after the 4th night in a row, I started getting curious. So one night when the light turned on again, I checked the camera app on my phone. The camera had recorded a short clip. But the yard looked empty. Nothing moving. Nothing visible. Watching the footage again. The next day, I watched the footage again. This time more carefully. And that's when I noticed something strange. Near the back fence, there was a dark shape. Very faint. Almost blending into the shadows. But it was moving slowly across the yard. The shape didn't look like an animal. It looked taller, almost like a person. But the movement wasn't normal. It glided slowly across the yard instead of walking. When it reached the fence, it simply disappeared into the darkness. Checking outside. That night when the motion light turned on again, I decided to look outside through the back window. The yard was lit up by the motion light. Everything looked normal. The trees were still. The fence was quiet. But near the shed, I thought I saw something standing there. A tall shadow. Completely still. The camera stops recording. I quickly opened the camera app to check the live feed. But the camera had stopped recording. The screen showed an error message. Connection lost. After about 30 seconds, the camera came back online. But the yard was empty again. Nothing there. The last night. A few days later, I replaced the camera with a newer one. Since then, the motion light hasn't turned on again at night. Not even once. But sometimes, when I look at the backyard late at night, I still feel like something might be standing near that fence. Just outside the light. Watching. Call to action CTA. If you enjoy creepy real stories like this one, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more true horror stories every week. And if you have motion lights outside your house, pay attention when they turn on at night. Because sometimes, they might be detecting something you can't clearly see. The unknown contact in my phone. True scary story narration. Hook first 10-15 seconds. One night while scrolling through my phone contacts, I noticed a name I didn't recognize. The strange part, I never saved that contact. But it was there in my phone, with a name that simply said, "Don't answer." A normal night. A few years ago, I was living alone in a small apartment in Oregon. Most nights were quiet. After work, I usually relaxed by watching videos or scrolling through my phone before going to sleep. That night was no different. Around midnight, I was cleaning up old contacts in my phone, deleting numbers I didn't need anymore. That's when I noticed something strange. The strange contact. Near the bottom of my contact list was a name I had never seen before. Don't answer. At first I thought it was some old joke contact I forgot about. But when I opened the contact details, there was no phone number. Just the name. No email. No information. Nothing. The phone rings. I shrugged it off and put my phone on the table. A few minutes later, my phone suddenly started ringing. I looked at the screen, and my stomach dropped. The incoming call was from the contact named Don't Answer. Ignoring the call. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. The phone kept ringing, but I didn't answer. Eventually, the call stopped. A few seconds later, I opened my call history. But something strange happened. The call wasn't listed. It was completely missing from the log. The second call. About 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. Same contact. Don't answer. This time, I decided to answer the call. Curiosity got the better of me. "Hello," I said. For a moment, there was silence. Then I heard a faint sound, like someone whispering very quietly. But I couldn't understand the words. Then the line disconnected. Checking the contact again. After the call ended, I went back to my contacts. I opened the Don't Answer contact again. But this time, it wasn't there anymore. The contact had completely disappeared from my phone. The strange detail. The next morning, I checked my phone again. Call history. Contacts. Everything. There was no record of the contact or the calls. Like they never existed. But sometimes late at night, my phone screen lights up for a moment, without any notification. And every time it happens, I can't help but wonder if that contact might appear again. Call to action CTA. If you enjoy creepy real stories like this one, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more horror stories every week. And if you ever find a strange contact in your phone, you might want to think twice before answering. Because sometimes, some calls are better left unanswered. The person standing in my hallway. True scary story narration. Hook first 10-15 seconds. One night I woke up suddenly around 2:30 a.m. At first, I thought I had heard a noise. But when I opened my eyes, I saw someone standing in the hallway outside my bedroom. Completely still. Just watching. The strange part. I lived alone. Living alone. A few years ago, I rented a small house in Michigan. It was a simple one-story house with a short hallway connecting the bedrooms and the living room. Since I lived alone, the house was usually very quiet. Most nights I locked all the doors, turned off the lights, and went to bed early. Nothing unusual ever really happened there. Until one night when I woke up unexpectedly. The figure in the hallway. I opened my eyes and looked toward the bedroom door. The door was slightly open, and the hallway light was on. At first, everything looked normal. But then I noticed something. A figure standing in the hallway. Tall. Completely still. Facing toward my bedroom. Trying to understand. My heart started racing. For a moment, I thought maybe I was still half asleep. So I blinked a few times. But the figure was still there. Not moving. Not speaking. Just standing quietly in the hallway. Turning on the light. I quickly reached for the lamp beside my bed and turned it on. The room lit up instantly. And when I looked back at the hallway, the figure was gone. The hallway was completely empty. Checking the house, I slowly got out of bed and walked into the hallway. The house was silent. I checked every room. The living room. The kitchen. The front door. Everything was locked. There was no sign that anyone had been inside the house. The strange detail. Before going back to bed, I turned off the hallway light. But when I walked past the hallway mirror, I noticed something strange. For just a moment in the reflection, it looked like someone was still standing behind me in the hallway. When I turned around, there was no one there. What happened after? Nothing like that ever happened again in that house. But ever since that night, whenever I wake up in the middle of the night, I always check the hallway first, just to make sure no one is standing there again. Call to action CTA. If you enjoy creepy true stories like this one, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more horror stories every week. And tonight, if you wake up suddenly in the middle of the night, take a look toward your hallway. Just to be sure, you're really alone. The voice from the closet. True scary story narration. Hook first 10-15 seconds. One night around 3 a.m., I woke up to a strange sound. At first, I thought it was coming from outside. But then I heard it again. A quiet voice. Coming from inside my bedroom. More specifically, from inside my closet. A normal apartment. A few years ago, I lived in a small apartment in Washington. It was a simple place with one bedroom, a kitchen, and a small living room. Nothing unusual about it. The bedroom had a small closet near the door where I kept jackets and a few boxes. Most nights I slept with the closet door closed, and everything was usually quiet. Until one night when something strange happened. The sound. Around 3 a.m., I suddenly woke up. At first, I didn't know why. The room was dark and silent. Then I heard something. A soft sound. Like someone whispering. I stayed completely still, trying to listen more carefully. And then I realized where the sound was coming from. The closet. Listening carefully. My heart started beating faster. I stared at the closet door across the room. The whispering sound continued for a few seconds. But I couldn't understand the words. It sounded like someone talking very quietly, almost like a conversation. Then suddenly, it stopped. Checking the closet. After a few minutes of silence, I slowly got out of bed. I turned on the bedroom light. The closet door was still closed. Everything looked normal. Still, I walked over and opened the door. Inside the closet was exactly what I expected. Clothes hanging. A few boxes on the floor. Nothing unusual. The second night. The next night, I tried to convince myself that maybe I imagined the sound. But around the same time, 3 a.m., I woke up again, and the whispering started, once again coming from the closet. The recording. This time I grabbed my phone and started recording the sound. The whispering lasted about 10 seconds. Then it stopped. The next morning, I listened to the recording. At first it sounded like faint noise. But when I turned the volume up, I noticed something strange. The whispering didn't sound like one voice. It sounded like two voices talking quietly. What happened after? After that night, I started sleeping with the closet door open. Strangely enough, the whispering never happened again. But sometimes when the room is completely quiet at night, I still glance toward that closet, just to make sure the door stays open. Call to action, CTA. If you enjoy creepy real stories like this one, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more horror stories every week. And if you ever hear strange sounds in your room late at night, you might want to check where they're coming from. Because sometimes, the sound might be closer than you think.